The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Howdy-ho, everybody. Coming to you cordless from glamorous Minneapolis. It's Thursday night, March 26, 2026. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. This is episode number 330, if you're marking your scorecards at home. Our guest tonight is Robert Bortins. He's the CEO of an organization called Classical Conversations, which supports classical Christian homeschooling in the United States. And he's also the author of a new book called Woke and Weaponized, how Karl Marx won the battle for American education, how we can win it back. And he's coming to us from his, oh, Jesus, terrible. Robert, did you say North Carolina?
Yeah, North Carolina.
North Carolina. Podcast studio there. Hi, Robert.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim. Appreciate you having me on to talk about Woke and Weaponized and everything going on in education today.
My pleasure. Very briefly, there's a whole bunch of stuff in your biography revolving rugby. Are you a former rugby player for Clemson?
Yeah, I played rugby at Clemson for 5 years because I stayed an extra. But yeah, I played 18 years total, and I've been coaching now for about 18 years as well. So yeah, just really enjoy sports and athletics, endeavors, and yeah, I've picked up on rugby.
That's good. Let's start with your personal story here because I found this kind of fascinating. You got into homeschooling because you were yourself was homeschooled, right?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled through high school. My mom and my dad both met at Michigan in the aerospace engineering program, and my mom decided in the early 80s that she wanted to homeschool her kids, and so that's what we did. And when I was entering high school, she started inviting families over to homeschool with us and started our organization, Classical Conversations. It's grown there from 10 of us in our basement to now there's about 135,000 students worldwide using Classical Conversations to homeschool through high school. I went and got an industrial engineering degree at Clemson, picked up the sport of rugby there and have really enjoyed it and just all that has to offer. Worked for a couple Fortune 50 companies after I graduated and eventually decided that I wanted to help more people homeschool and came to work for the family company, Classical Conversations, in 2012. After about 8 years of climbing the corporate ladder, if you will. And yeah, I've just been enjoying helping Classical Conversations expand into, I think we're in over 60 countries now.
So it's basically a family business, but I'm under the impression based on what I read that your involvement or you heading it took it from basically a small time operation to a big time operation, right?
Yeah. So yeah, when I took it over, there was, we had about 30 or 40,000 students. So we were growing, but only had a handful of employees. And so I really streamlined operations and kind of, professionalized the back office and really made it so that we could grow into this worldwide phenomenon. And, I credit my homeschooling and of course my education at Clemson for helping me get those tools and just what I learned from my mentors and things like that. So it's been quite an exciting journey, just seeing, how God works and how parents have been more and more choosing homeschooling as an option for their kids and doing it with confidence.
So, Robert, how did we get to this place? I mean, it's pretty much universally agreed in the United States, by the majority of people anyway, that public education in America now sucks. There's no doubt about it. And I'm pulling this out of a blurb from your book. I'm just going to quote this outright. The historical roots of ideological indoctrination in schools, tracing the path from Marxism to modern classroom. How the hell did we get here?
Yeah. So it's been very intentional really from the beginning. And so We go back to 1820, before there was even public schools in the United States. So a lot of people don't know that the public school system didn't even begin until 1850 and really didn't take roots until 1900. And a guy named Robert Owen, he's a Welsh industrialist, and he started a collectivist commune in New Harmony, Indiana. What his goal was to disprove Christianity, to show that Christianity and the free market capitalism wouldn't work. And so he described a trinity of evil: private property, Christianity, and marriage. And he kind of saw this idea that the only way you could defeat these trinity of evil was through a creation of a public school system. He took his ideologies to Prussia, which is Germany pre-World War I. They wanted a bunch of loyal foot soldiers so that, of course, they could launch a world war. And they saw that this kind of public school system ideology would be great. It got picked up here in the United States by a guy named Horace Mann.
Hold on, I gotta stop you for a second.
Yep,
So
sure.
this Weber guy, he was kind of wrong about everything, huh?
Yeah, he was his commune.
How do people get so misguided? So you got the what he called the the triumphant of evil, and all those three things are basically the bedrock of Western Western civilization. I just find this astonishing. How people, it's like, how do you get the idea that stuff's bad? I don't know. Tell me. It's like,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's what Karl Marx held on to, right? That private property was kind of this root of all evil, and you had to get rid of it. And that was what's caused greed and war and famine and starvation and exploitation of children labor and all this stuff. And that if we could just have a good group of collectivists, that we could all live in this utopian harmony. And of course, that ideology went on to kill 100 millions of people. Many starved to death, many gassed to death. It's whether it's Nazism or communism.
The original pilgrims to the United States, they proved it didn't work. They started their society here over in the New World working under collectivism. They did it for a year, and it was so bad they dumped it. They were basically starving.
Yep, that's what the pilgrims, the first year, is because they tried to be collectivists, and then they became free market capitalists and honored private property and hard work, and suddenly we have our first Thanksgiving. And so, yeah, collectivism has not worked anywhere. It's mostly always leads to starvation. And so, but the people who believe in it, don't believe the facts. They just say, true communism has never been, tried before. And, they make up all of these excuses for all the people that they've killed.
I go on about this constantly here. Yeah, the big excuse is it's never been done right. Oh, yeah. No, it simply doesn't work.
Yeah,
that's all there is to it. You can do it 8 ways till Sunday. All right, so fast forward here to the 20th century. How the hell did we get to the point where basically our public schools are basically now run by communists, basically?
Yeah, so a couple things happened. One is that the big foundations, so think like the Rockefellers, the Ford Foundation, these type of people, they wanted a incompetent, barely competent workforce. And so they used the grant making abilities, their foundation work, their hands in the pockets of our elected officials to basically what they wanted to do. And this was quoted in Chapter 8 in 1982. Their plan was to successfully merge the United States with the Soviet Union so that they could, be all-encompassing, all-powerful, and have a world after their own vision. And they said, in our dreams, we have limitless resources, and people yield themselves with perfect hospitality to our molding hands. And so it was really the same thing. People are familiar with USAID and the Minnesota Learning Centers. Well, they've been doing the similar thing since the 1950s, where they are taking our federal tax dollars and weaponizing our public school system against us. And so they partnered with the Soviet Union to bring in their education ideologies into our teachers' colleges, such as Columbia Teachers College. The USSR understood they did not have a military big enough to defeat the United States, And so if they were to defeat us, they had to do it by undermining personal responsibility, undermining private property, and that they could do that through the education system. And that would give them their biggest kind of bang for their buck. And so that's what they did. They worked with these big foundations who are nonprofits. They don't pay any taxes. Meanwhile, they're getting grants and basically molding our teachers' colleges to make it so that anyone who graduates with a teaching degree, whether they self-identify with this philosophy or not, but become little collectivist like teachers, where they just are taught these ideologies indirectly through the methodologies they're learning and teaching. They think that they're doing a great job because this is what their professor told us, to do well, and that's how they got their, good grades. But meanwhile, every single kind of idea is to undermine our self-sovereignty and put us into a situation where we would accept a overlord to rule over us.
Now, you brought up a couple things here. First of all, you said this was in the early 1980s. It should be noted that 10 years later, a decade later, the USSR folded.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. And then on top of that, you mentioned the fact that the USSR concluded they couldn't beat us in a conventional war. And why is that? Because we had more money.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean,
it's just I don't understand. I don't know. I just don't. I'm constantly at a loss for words why people can't put A and B together. But the one thing I need to bring out too, my personal experience. I grew up in small town Minnesota. I'm an old man. I went to school 50 years ago. Now, we were taught kind of how to think. And the thing is, you brought up the thing, and I'm actually going to ask, this is my question here. Do you think, you're talking about the fact that they wanted to turn out barely competent people to basically be low-cost labor. I'm starting to wonder if on top of the political indoctrination, if the goal currently is to basically turn out non-educated people. So basically, you have enough education to read a ballot, and that's about it. I mean, because when 50 years ago, I could make a good argument. I grew up in a small town with a fairly good public school system at the time, that we were actually taught to think. And now children aren't really taught to think anymore. They're taught what to think. Am I right about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so each kind of generation has forgotten what the previous generation knew. So it took, 5 or 6 generations for really this kind of collectivist ideology to seep through our school system. But that was one of the reasons my mom homeschooled me. Is my dad's 10 years older than my mom. And so when she met and they got married, she saw that he knew how to think about things. And she had, just 10 years later, hadn't received that sort of same education, even though they were both, aerospace engineers at Michigan. And so that was what really piqued her curiosity. And that's absolutely what the Carnegie Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundations were colluding to do. It's, well documented that they were trying to make it so that students would be taught math that would be not practical in the real world. And, that they didn't want people to, they wanted to be good consumers, not people who saved or people who created and built things, but people who would buy their products. They wanted them to be just literate enough so that they could, follow directions and read a manual and, not be intellectually curious, so that they'd be willing to stand at a factory line for 8 hours a day and be comfortably numb. And so you see now where I think 34% of students read at grade level. 50% of adults have a 6th grade literacy in the United States or less. And so we've really created an illiterate, consumer mindset society who, gets in credit card debt, doesn't know how to balance a checkbook, but does whatever the screen tells them to do that's on TV. And so it's we're seeing the fruit of it, unfortunately, now in our society with, nearly $40 trillion in debt and so many people who are just, reliant on the government or even just grifting off the government. Like I said, like those Minnesota Learning Centers you have up there where, the government wants every kid to be educated. So they go spend a bunch of money and give it to these Somalian pirates that have been imported into your state. And then they, steal that money and, send it back to their homeland. So It's all part of the idea that if we can get, how do we underline America, the richest, most successful nation in the world? Well, we have to create an uneducated populace, which is they're in the process of doing, and you can just look at the statistics to know that that's happening. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks that our education system's good in the United States, and all the national rankings, we're in the middle tier, 34th in the world or something with our education system. Well, how do you get people to give up their freedom? Well, make it so that they never appreciated it in the first place. And so that's really where we are. And now they've got woke communists writing our curriculum, writing the textbooks that go into our public schools. So even if you have a good teacher trying to do their best, they're still teaching from a curriculum source that's undermining our self-sovereignty and our national sovereignty, so that we can, I said, as the Ford Foundation wants to do, successfully merge us with the collectivists around the world. And so, we're seeing it now in Canada and Europe, right? They've accepted these ideologies, and now they're poorer than they were 10 years ago. Their life styles, their ability to advance has degraded considerably over the last 20 years. The more they embrace this collectivist ideology that is in our classroom.
Not to mention the fact that politicians are making absolutely stupid decisions. I mean, we're just talking here on the other night about the fact in Germany, my friend David Strom was on, the columnist, and about in Germany, the fact they blew up all their nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
With that, what? And the thing is, that's clean energy. I mean, I can go on about the fact that climate change is a hoax, but that's beside the point. It actually fits in with the climate change crowd, and they killed them anyway.
Yep, exactly. And now they're rationing, energy with the war in Iran. I mean, all these countries that abandoned nuclear and coal, they're thankfully it's the summer. Otherwise, their people would be freezing to death because they just don't have it. So their manufacturing base is going away, and they're going to continue to go into poverty, over the next 10 or 20 years. And so it really is, this idea of collectivism. It has never worked anywhere. It's been tried, but there are many people who have fought for it and have infiltrated our ideas through this school system.
I don't have to tell you, there's still people who think if it's done the right way, it'll work.
Yep.
That's because on paper it seems to make sense, and actually it doesn't. You're getting back to this Weber guy and Marx about the two things that this Marxism completely leaves out is the principles of basically incentive and possession. And possession is a basic human thing. People know they own stuff. Babies know they own the sucker, that sucker belongs to them. Babies know that. You don't have to tell them, and so they're basically asking the whole of society to go against human impulse,
Yep, exactly. Instead of working with it. Horace Mann, who there's like 87, I think, high schools named after him in the United States, said this in 1867. We who are engaged in the sacred cause of education are entitled to look upon all parents as having given hostages to our cause. And what cause was that? It's this collectivist ideology. And so why do so many people believe it'll work? Well, it's been ingrained into our public school system that collectivism will work if it's just been tried. And that's why they took over the textbooks companies. That's why they've tried to take over the public school system and take over the teachers' unions.
Now, I know your organization, of course, is based around homeschooling, but do you see any way out of this thing in the public education to get away from this?
No, it's inherent to the system. I mean, it's the roots and the dirt of a tree will decide what the fruit is that it produced. Does it produce good fruit or bad fruit? The root of the public school system was to undermine American sovereignty, American self-sovereignty of the individual for a collectivist ideology. And so, I mean, the public school system's not reformable because it's working exactly as its framers wanted it to work. They wanted a illiterate working class. They wanted people to be on the consumerism hamster wheel. It's all designed to the bells and whistles. Everything was designed by psychiatrists in order to train children to be obedient to whoever is in the authority figures, even if the authority figures are telling them things like put a mask on. You can't get sick if you're 6 feet away from somebody. This plastic piece between you and the counter is going to stopping you from getting sick. Take this experimental jab and you'll be fine. All of these things have been trained into people through the methodology of classroom management. And so homeschooling and private education, classical education is the only way to really save ourselves. The public school can be less bad. It can never be good again, because the parents and just society in general has forgotten so much of what good looks like that it took 130 years to get to this place. It would take 130 years to reform it, and that's if you keep getting the right people in place. So the best thing for families to do is to get their kids out any way they can. The best thing for churches to do is to, either start a private school, let homeschoolers use your facility, start an education fund. If you're a business and you want intelligent workers in the future, give scholarships to private schools, help throw fundraisers for private education or for homeschoolers, because it's growing. Homeschoolers, when I first started, there was about 40,000 of us in the United States in the early 80s when I was getting started, and now there's about 4 million in the United States. So about 8 out of every 100 school-age children is homeschooled now. About 12 are in private school. So we've gone from about 8 to 10% of kids outside of the system now, somewhere between 15 and 20%. So it's slowly coming. More and more families, especially younger ones, are refusing to put their kids into the system, and it's starting to collapse on itself, as it should.
Yeah. So, okay, I don't have any children myself, but I've thought about this. If I don't think I personally would have the time or actually the knowledge to homeschool a child, but and I think that based on your biography, I kind of got the impression this is what happened with Classical Conversations, that basically your mother ended up, for all practical purposes, kind of starting a private schools because she got a whole bunch of other people that she was homeschooling other than your immediate family. And that's basically a private school, isn't it? I mean, am I naive about this or?
Well, yeah. So you're somewhat right. We meet once a week at Classical Conversations with a parent tutor that's trained in our methodologies and our curriculum, with typically about 8 to 10 students, maybe as high as 12 students in a classroom. And so they're still being homeschooled those other 5 days, 6 days a week. But once a week, we're getting together and having conversation, reading our history papers, doing things like mock trial and debate and, science experiments, things that, a family might not be able to do at home. And so, like you said, a lot of parents are, nervous, like, I need to know everything. Well, that's like our curriculum is designed for parents who don't know everything. And, we're designed, we want to walk alongside you. We do things like free homeschool boot camps, so you can, understand how to teach and pass on knowledge. And you've got that community of homeschoolers with you to, hang out with, be social with, as well as, bounce questions off of. So, yeah, the curriculum is designed for, people who can, don't have a degree. We have people with a high school diploma who have successfully homeschooled their kid through high school, got near perfect SAT scores and go on for full rides. And so, the world will tell you that's impossible, but mother's love.
Correct me, but from what I understand, the best statistics I've seen is that, as a general rule, homeschool kids do better on the standardized tests than public school kids. Am I right about that?
Yeah, they do better than in the public school kids by a lot, typically like 15 or 20 percentage points. And it's the same level as like a high level college prep private school is where homeschoolers are going. So not like a like a $30,000 a year private school is kind of the level of scores that homeschoolers get. And there's so many colleges now that are actively recruiting homeschoolers, and even like entrepreneurs and business people. I get calls all the time like, hey, do you have any homeschool kids I can hire?
Yeah.
Like they don't even have to go to college. I'll teach them everything they need to know. I just need people who know how to think, like you said, and homeschoolers still know how to think.
the colleges are probably encouraging it because they don't have to do any remedial education. I mean, the number of kids who get into college who basically can't read and certainly can't write, although I find the terrible thing in the last 50 years that writing has basically become a specialty, which I think is terrible. But I mean, it's astonishing the number of kids who are going to college who have to take remedial courses. I just find this whole thing is nuts.
It is nuts, and they're taxing us to death to pay for it, right?
Yeah,
and
that's
so
the other
it's
thing too, right? I'm getting taxed through the nose for a system that does not work, or at least doesn't work the way people think it should. Now,
Yeah.
here's my other question to you, as an organization and also as a person involved in this. Do you find any downsides to private schooling?
Not generally speaking. There are the thing that's the possible downside for private schools is a lot of them aren't their marketing and what's happening in the classroom don't really align. And so they might be really just not too much better than your local public school, or they might be undermining that parent-child relationship. And so the big thing when I tell parents is ask, how does a private school, interact with you as the parent? Like, how are you informed? What are your kind of rights and responsibilities? And if the private school just shoos you away, like, we just need a check, every month, let us handle that. Well, that's not really a true partnership. And so, we need to find private schools that really help parents be better parents and strengthen that relationship with their child instead of undermining it. So there's a number of private schools that are just like public schools, just with better drugs, is what I say, higher level of stuff. So you've got to be careful. Just because it's a private school doesn't mean it's good. So yeah, I would definitely try to have conversations with some of the students there, some of the faculty, ex-faculty, especially, because I talk to people all the time who used to work at private schools that, have good reputations, and then they tell me about, how dysfunctional it is behind the scenes. So I just say there's nothing universal about it. Each private school could be good, could be bad. But I think, just as a parent, just don't do your research.
So I'm a little unclear specifically about what Classical Conversations does, other than people who actually want to encourage their or actually want to do homeschooling with their children. So and I hate to use this term because we've been using it disparagingly, but I'm going to use it just as an adjective here. So does your organization encourage like what basically would be like a neighborhood collective or something like that, or like we're talking about, like your mother, where you basically like take kids from the neighborhood and kind of an ad hoc sort of private school? Do you encourage that sort of thing, or?
Yeah, so each of those communities kind of recruits other families to join them inside of the homeschooling community and to support one another. And so it is a collective effort in the sense of...
you just use the term. So that's what you call it, a homeschooling community, huh?
Yeah, we call it a homeschool community. And so, but it's people with the same vision for their kids to really know how to think instead of what to think, and to embrace the classics. So, you're reading, things like the Iliad and the Odyssey. You're translating Latin sentences. You're, reading the Federalist Papers. You're reading the Constitution. You're looking at how those things interact with each other. You're not reading some woke professor's textbook about those events. You're actually going to read the original source documents. And so, and the whole time we're practicing, memorization, we're practicing public speaking, we're practicing, good handwriting skills, all of these things that society has kind of thrown to the side. And, now we're getting and seeing the results of that. Those are the things that have been time tested and proven to work for 2,000 years. And we've been proving now for almost 30 years that they still work today to create an educated populace. And so, it's really cool.
So what do you guys think of social media? I mean, I don't have to tell you, this has just happened this morning or yesterday, about the fact that that Meta and Google were found guilty of, it was Meta and I'm sorry, I forget, was it Google? were found
Yeah,
guilty.
probably Google.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
this morning. Yeah, social media is terrible for kids for many reasons. Just the access to all of humanity, many of it things that aren't beneficial, not glorifying, not things that make you a better human, but drag you down. And of course, you got bullying and all of those other things. We don't want to have technology in our classrooms. We encourage students not even to use calculators until they're, seventh or eighth grade. We want them to learn to be able to do multiplication tables inside of their own head. So we don't really want, once you get older, you can type your papers out, but we prefer handwritten papers because handwriting's not just a skill. Of course, we want you to read the Constitution, and that's in cursive, but also creates strengthens your brain and creates neurological pathways when you can handwrite, and that helps you learn more, think clear going forward. And so, we don't, there's a time and place for technology. Social media was meant to bring us together, and in many ways, it's done the exact opposite. We're more polarized today than ever before, and it's like giving your kid a chainsaw. Most parents wouldn't give their kid a running chainsaw, but too many of them are more than happy to hand them a cell phone and are surprised when they're damaged afterwards.
Robert, I don't talk about this on the show often because I don't want to talk about the details, but I was actually one of the developers of social media, and I got to admit, I regret my involvement. I think in the long run, it's done more harm than good. There are some good things about it, especially for adults. Like, for example, my wife uses Facebook to keep in touch with her family. That's great. Sure. They're communicating, but on the whole, I think it's more harmful than it is beneficial. I really do. I regret.
A lot of it is. I mean, one, they didn't know early on, but two, it's a lot of the psychiatrists that they're hiring and these behavior scientists that they're in there. I mean, these people, collectively believe in keeping people on the platform. They're not actually trying to enrich your life, make you a flourishing human being. They're trying to get more ad revenue from your participation. So there's probably ways to do social media where it's not as harmful as it is today, but they're intentionally making it as harmful as possible because that's what's driving their revenue.
People don't realize that you are the product. If you're on Facebook, the product isn't what you see on the screen. It's not the ads. You're the actual product.
Yeah.
So, you sign up and it's ostensibly it's free. It really isn't because, they take a whole part of your mind. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to echo what you're saying. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
That's right. Exactly. There's a reason free.
Time is the most precious commodity any of us have. Like, you can't buy more time. Elon Musk cannot buy more time. He is going to die.
Right.
Right. And he's the wealthiest man in the world. And so we don't value our time enough because social media just sucks it away in exchange for what? Just mindless doom scrolling, depression, anxiety, all of these issues that it brings, and especially the young people whose brains aren't fully developed and aren't getting the sort of education to even develop their brain in the first place, because the same psychiatrists that design the classroom, their same ideologies are the ones designing these social media companies and how to keep your attention on them. So, I mean, there's been benefits, of course, being able to get some news right away and maybe, being able to, knock down some of these legacy media companies that are just feeding lies for the establishment. But overall, there's so many concerns. So, I mean, I don't know. I would, maybe once you're like 25 or 26 and your brain's fully developed, maybe social media is okay. But
no, I actually think you're right. I think for adults, it's probably, I still think it's more harm than good, but it's not necessarily bad. One of the primary problems with dealing with children is that they aren't used to, don't have any societal buffer to criticism. It's like, so, people see, three people online are insulting them and they go into a tizzy. Where if you're a real adult, and maybe there's a lot of adults who can't deal with it either. It's like people complain about me all the time. I'm used to it. I'm sure that you got the same thing. It's like that just goes along with it. Children aren't used to that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, and the whole idea, B.F. Skinner, he's a psychiatrist, basically was trying to condition children to not step out, to not be part of the crowd, and to stay in the crowd. And so that's why they've done experiments where they'll hold up a card that's purple. They'll have all these people in the room, and the first person, is a paid actor or whatever, says blue. And the next person says blue, and it keeps going around until they get to the person they're experimenting on. And even though the card is clearly purple, the first 5 people said it's blue, they say blue too because they don't want to step out of the crowd.
Right.
And so that's why when you get like social media and this bullying and harassment type stuff, like the kids have been conditioned not to step out of the crowd, and suddenly they're getting harassed because they're not part of the in crowd. And now they've got all of these psychologically damaging ideologies towards themselves, and whether they start cutting or suicide or depression or drugs, whatever they end up turning to. And so it's all part of this loop to make us less human, make us more like controllable animals, to take away our sphere of sovereignty and exchange it for whatever crumbs the crown chooses to give us.
What's next for your company? What's coming up?
Classical Conversations, we're going to take on the colleges next. So we've been expanding, we're K through 12 now, and we've been expanding a little bit into colleges, but we're definitely going to look at higher education over the next couple of years and start coming for them now.
So how do you do that? Because at that point, it's not homeschooling per se, right? And also, we have this thing in the United States about accreditation, which is bullshit. But the fact of the matter is people do follow it,
Yeah, it is. So we'll be partnering with some other colleges that have some already accredited, but we will be putting in our own kind of professors into local communities as well, so that you're not getting those woke ideologies, that you're actually getting a real classical education with a community of learners locally who actually care about the subjects, instead of just some mindless drones trying to get a degree because that's what society's told them to do. Go get $100,000 in debt so we can give you a good job. That was a lie. It doesn't work.
It's absolutely a lie. It's complete crap. I mean, totally. I'm putting your book on the screen here. Here it is. You wrote this with Alex Newman. He's an investigative journalist. Am I right about that?
Yeah, Alex is an investigative journalist. He's broken a lot of big stories. Been on stage with people like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, and it was a pleasure working with him because book is not my opinion. It's all documented. It's full of quotes, original source documents. We've got 12 pages of appendixes on the back, so you can go double check all of our resources, because what's in this book, like some of it was kind of hard to put in because it's so crazy that if you weren't reading what they actually said, like you would say, this is a lie, but it's there, it's documented. These people did not have our best interest in mind. They wanted to dumb down society so they could rule it. And so far they've been successful. And the only way to bring it back is for each of us individually to take personal responsibility for our kids' education, for the education of the kids in our community, and to throw off big government.
Robert, you could say that about most things in modern life now in the 21st century. Most things sound like they're crazy.
Yeah, well, we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It's been a very interesting conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Everyone can pick the book up on Amazon.com. So just search Woken Weaponized.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Robert. We'll see you. Our thanks to Robert Bortins there for joining us. The whole world's going to hell, isn't it? Yeah, I know. I forgot to mention this. I was going to tell him this during the interview. I think it's really kind of an appreciation for what we were talking about the fact that, all right, so I've been out of high school 50 years. I went to high school in small town Minnesota. In the 50 years I've been out of school, public school, in Minnesota, the cost adjusted for inflation per student has gone up 6 times, 600%. It's gone up in 50 years, and yet the test scores for students have been continually dropping the entire time. We and in Minnesota, we used to consistently be one of the top 3 states in the union for educated students. It was always between us, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. And now I think we're like 17th or something like that. It's really terrible. Of course, the thing, you got your Leering centers, here in Minneapolis. So, there's that. And that's where all the money goes, wouldn't you know? All right. So this is our footnotes for Thursday, it's not January, it's March 26th. Got a few things here. Now, I don't know if you guys heard about this. This happened this morning. The Republicans had a closed door meeting regarding the war, and apparently it did not go well. Now, this is according to the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail is they're generally accurate with stuff, not completely, but generally. It's not like the Guardian, where my boyfriend Bill O'Reilly said just a couple months ago on his newscast. He said the Guardian is an unreliable news source, and they're right. It is. But the Daily Mail is a really interesting publication. It's extremely popular, and I think one of the reasons it's popular is because it's a really good mix of really accurate news reporting and bullshit. And when I mean bullshit, I'm talking about like crazy, stupid crap like gossip and what happens on The Bachelorette and all that sort of stuff. That's really what I mean. Gee, I have to say, I find it compelling it's a compelling read. I look at it regularly. I pull stuff out of it. And yeah, whatever they got going on there is working. It's the single most read publication out of Britain. It is, even and in Britain too. Of all the tabloids, it's by far the most read. So, and of course, they had their TV show, and that was very popular for a while. I don't know why it went away, but it did. Anyway, they're reporting that this meeting about the war did not go well. Apparently, like, Nancy Mace walked out in the middle of it, and apparently the contention says they won't actually say outright, but the strong implication is that the Republican senators feel they've been lied to about the fact about putting boots on the ground in Iraq. That seems to, no one will actually come out and say it outright, but that's a strong implication, is that they're pissed off about this. Now, I got to tell you, I did not see any way we could avoid this if we're going to accomplish the objective. And if the objective, and whatever they say, the objection at this point, it may not have been earlier, but the objective now is regime changed. We are being encouraged by the other people the other countries in that region, to get rid of Iran, the Iran theocracy once and for all, because it's dangerous for everybody. These people are crazy. That's all the way you can. If you want to give nuclear weapons to crazy people, well, then you're crazy too. That's all I can say. So it appears that they were briefed on that, and that was the reaction. I don't see any way you can get around it. I don't. And not only that, gotta admit, I don't have a problem with it. I don't, even though I understand people might die, I understand all that stuff, but the fact of the matter is, I think we have to finish the job, and the job is completely getting rid of the theocracy in Iran. That is the objective here. And I don't know if it was to start, but it certainly is now, and everyone recognizes it. And frankly, Trump won't say this, but I think this whole thing about negotiating with Iran is simply to give them some colorful cover, so they can say, well, you see, Iran didn't agree, so we're going to go in. Because Iran's not going to agree, and they know that. They know they had this 15-point plan. Iran's not going to agree to any of it because they're crazy, basically. Their goal is still to wipe out Israel and the United States. That's their goal, and they won't agree to not having nuclear weapons because they can't accomplish their goal if they don't. It's simple as that. It's really, really quite simple. So I kind of thought maybe we would talk Israel into doing the boots on the ground for us, or at least, and excuse me. And I'm still thinking, my impression is they might be the vast majority of the ground troops is Israelis and not us. But still, we're going to do something. We're going to be there. I understand everyone's fear or excuse me, or trepidation about the fact that, okay, we've done this a million times before, it never goes well. Yeah, and yeah, I'm the guy who's always telling you socialism doesn't work because it's been tried a million times, and people say they can. It's never been done right. But in this case, I actually do think that. I think that the Trump administration can actually do this correctly, and that is go in there, change the regime, and get out. Because it's the specific circumstances and just the fact that these guys, it's obvious they have their shit together, and that brings me to the second point. The mainstream media, the legacy media, is lying through their teeth about how this is going. It's really disgusting. If you listen to any of the major newscasts or read the New York Times or everything, they clearly say that we're losing the war. That is not true. It's simply not true. That's the thing. It's blatant, utter lying. Like David Strom and I were talking last week. It's gone beyond liberal bias. Now they're absolutely lying through their teeth. They're saying stuff on air and in their newspaper publications that simply are not true. And this is disgusting. I just don't know what to make of this. I've always said this. I expect politicians to lie. I do. That's the thing. That they're going to lie to get reelected. They're going to lie for their constituencies. I expect the Democrats to lie because the Democrats, frankly, they're in the minority, not only in Congress but in the American public now. They are in the minority, and they know that, and they have their little concentrated, base of liberal white women, and they lie to them. That's what they do to keep them happy. So I understand why they're doing it. Why the press does it, I don't have a clue. I understand why they're doing it, but it's wrong. Your job is to report stuff accurately, and no, they're not doing that. They're shilling for the Democratic Party, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. I just don't believe it. You can't turn on MSNBC, CNN, read the New York Times. Everything they're saying about the war is basically the opposite of what's true, basically. And you could just take that to the bank. If CNN says something, you can assume the opposite is correct. It's really, really terrible. I don't know what to make of this at all. I have my notes here in my outline. I put down the lying liars, and that's what they are. It's just unbelievable. So now in the show description today, we talked about this, and this is really, really getting weird. I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now, about the fact that scientists and people associated with the military in the United States have been mysteriously disappearing or getting killed, and not by accident, they're being assassinated, basically. Well, a sixth person is now happened. What was it? Well, just on 2 nights ago, I said there were 5 people. Now there's a 6th person, and her name is Melissa Casillas from New Mexico. She is an administrative assistant at the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Of these 6 people, 4 of them are interconnected. 2 of them are not, but the 2 that aren't were working on very prominent scientific projects that benefited the military, and they're all connected to the military, all 6 of them. But 4 of these people are connected to each other. Now this Cassius woman, she is an administrative assistant at the Los Alamos, and you may think, well, so she's a secretary. So what does it matter? When you're this, but if you're in these high level situations, the administrative assistants have basically all the knowledge that their superior does, because it all filters through them. So I haven't seen any mention in any of the news reports of whether she actually has a security clearance per se, but she basically knows everything her boss knows. And for a while, her boss was William McCaslin, the other guy who's gone missing. I guess not currently, but that's because McCaslin retired from the Air Force. But at one time, she was an administrative assistant to him, and he's missing. And like this, and then there's this Monica Reyes woman whose disappearance is really, really bizarre. She's hiking in the Los Angeles National Forest outside of Los Angeles, and she's with 2 other people, and they're basically together, except she's like 30 30 feet down the trail behind them, and all of a sudden she's gone, just disappeared. Basically before their eyes. Not really, but they turn. She's talking and stuff, and all of a sudden, they don't hear her, and they turn around. She's not there. What the hell? I mean, God. And so this Cassius woman, she left her house, and she was spotted on a surveillance camera several hours later walking around town without her wallet, her phone, or her keys. Now, here's the real amazing thing. This is really, really weird. She left both her phones at home. Like a lot of people, she has a personal phone and a business phone. Los Alamos, for security reasons, they issue them separate phones. She has 2 cell phones. They were both factory resets, so they were wiped clean, both of them. Most people do not do that because all your information, your contact list goes away. But they were both wiped clean, but from factory resets, and that's just bizarre. So, I can't remember the guy's name, former assistant director of the FBI. I mean, he said they have to be on this. This is getting beyond coincidence. It is. This is just really, really weird. And, it might have something to do with national security issues. It might have something to do with a project they're working on. Who knows? All 4 of these people have all been linked to the UFO issue. And people say, and I have no idea. I really don't. I've talked about this before. We've mentioned this before. I talk about a lot of things, and I just basically repeat them because most of you people don't watch every show. 12 days before John F. Kennedy was shot in 1963, he issued an executive order, and this is legit. This is verified. It was public information. This executive order has a number. I don't know what it is offhand, but he issued an executive order to command the Pentagon to start sharing UFO information with the Russians. And I think if I'm right, it actually calls it UFO information in the executive order. 12 days later, he was assassinated. Now, a lot of people think, well, no, that's, and I'm not even going to go into the assassination here. I'll tell you, basically, Lee Harvey Oswald was definitely involved and might have been one of the shooters, but he wasn't the only one. That's all there is to it. At this point, I think there's enough evidence that you can actually say. Now, there's several different stories of who the other shooters were. I have my favorite one, but still, I think at this point, it's pretty much agreed that he was shot from the grassy knoll, and that was the shot that blew up his head. And so, you can make an argument that the UFO thing has nothing to do with that, and it probably doesn't. But it is a weird coincidence because David Grush and other people. This has been reported for years that people involved with the UFO issues have died very mysteriously, and some of that's probably conjecture or exaggeration. But I don't know if all of it is. It gets to the point where I've said this. One of the things about the preponderance of evidence in the UFO situation is that you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who say they've been abducted. They're not every single one of them is lying. If you have 2 or 3 dozen people who died under mysterious circumstances, maybe not all of that 3 dozen is an accident, and maybe it is. I mean, that's not a big enough sample. It isn't. It's not like hundreds of thousands, but you do start to wonder. It's like, like, for example, all right, so I'll give you an example. The Kecksburg incident in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, December 1965. There was a guy the program director who worked at the local radio station. He said he discovered what happened. Now, there's never been any verification from the government at all. The government said a meteor crashed. There are people who actually saw this. About 2 dozen people from the town saw this spacecraft crash on the ground. They actually saw it. So you can take that into consideration. But the program director of the local radio station, don't remember his name, don't remember the name of the call letters of the station. He said he figured out through investigation what that thing was that crashed, and he was going to run an audio documentary. In 1965, local radio was still a big deal. So it's like, this is not surprising at all. You have to understand that local people listen to the local radio station. And he did a documentary, he prepared a documentary to run on the local station. And just before they're going to run it, like the night before, Fed guys came to the radio station. His secretaries saw this, although they didn't hear it because it happened inside a studio, so it was soundproof. But they saw the discussion and apparently it was pretty heated. But the guy not only basically scrapped the documentary, but his wife said he was never the same again. So that guy, about 4 or 5 years later, so I think we're in 1969, he suddenly told friends of his and his family that he was going to run the original documentary. He said he didn't care. He was tired of keeping the secret. He was going to run it. And just before he ran it, he died in a car accident, a single car accident, no other car involved. He ran off the road and ran into a tree, supposedly. Now, I'm going to mention this because Stan Gordon, who grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and got into the whole UFO thing because of this incident, he told me on the air here today on the show, I asked him point blank, he was on a couple of years ago. I asked him what happened there, and he said, as far as he could tell, it was a legitimate car accident. This guy was not killed, as far as he could tell. It was a coincidence. And I trust Stan's reporting and investigation. I do. But the fact of the matter is, when you start to pile up stuff like this, it becomes harder and harder to think they're all just coincidences, you know? So now we got 4 people who knew each other, who all 4 of them have gone missing, and a couple of them, at least, under very mysterious circumstances. It's just really weird. Okay, so let's go to the pyramids in Giza in Egypt, and the same people, the same guys who said that they discovered a giant underground complex underneath the middle pyramid, have now said they think there's a second Sphinx buried in the sand in the complex. There's 3 pyramids and the Sphinx on this plateau, and I don't know how big it is. I'm guessing it's about a mile square, maybe a little less. I don't know. But supposedly they say they think they found a second pyramid buried in the sand. And the reason this is important is because there's a carving between the legs of the known Sphinx, the one you know, that references a second Sphinx, but everyone always thought it was figurative, that was mythological. And that's the real weird part about this. So there's this carving there that says references a second Sphinx on the plateau, and there's never been a second Sphinx, and these guys suddenly say they found it. They also say that they said, the way I understand this, they claim they're 80% sure that this complex, this giant underground complex underneath the plateau, is legit. They think, they're quite convinced it's real. And so who knows what's going on there too. Now the Egyptian government has been very hesitant to let people dig on the plateau for archaeology purposes. And they're not going to, especially supposedly this complex is like, a couple 100 feet deep and several floors. And then you wonder, well, I've never bought this thing about the extraterrestrials building the pyramids. I always thought that was bullshit. It's because I just did, but you start to wonder, would they have built that? And wouldn't that be kind of hard? I mean, supposedly the main pyramid at Giza, the large one, it has like 2 million blocks in it, and supposedly it was built in 20 years. And somebody figured out you'd have to lay, I didn't do the math before we went on the air here. You'd have to lay like a block every 4 minutes, 24 hours a day to get it done in 20 years or something like that. I mean, it's an incredible feat. It really is. I don't personally think there was any sort of weird technology involved. I think they just did it out of brute force. They had 100,000 people working on it. It's a lot of people. But that said, I mean, I understand some of the basic premises of how they did it. It would be extremely difficult, but I don't know. I just don't buy the thing that it was that I think that if the ETs did it, I think it would frankly look a lot more polished. I think it would. But on the other hand, too, there are shafts in the main pyramid that they don't know what they're there for. And it's been the Egyptian government has privately acknowledged the fact that they think the basement of that pyramid was basically used as a giant battery because there's evidence that hydrochloric acid flooded the whole place. And first of all, that's a shitload of hydrochloric acid. And secondly, the only reason you do that is to generate electricity. That's the only reason. So they think there was some sort of microwave transmission, or it's just, I don't know. It gets really weird. And, but the thing is, it's the only one of the 8 original wonders of the world that's still standing. And you have to understand that pyramid was the tallest man-made object on the entire planet for 4,000 years until the Eiffel Tower, I think it was, or something like that. It's like unbelievable. And okay, so I'm going to leave you with this tonight. There's a woman in England who says she married a railroad tram car. She married it. She got married. This is like, it's like a train. She married a train. Yeah. It's called and I should have written this down. It's called not objectophobia or something like that, about people who are sexually attracted to inanimate objects. And she has a thing for the train. Well, actually one specific car, apparently. So, yeah. And she has a boyfriend, but that didn't stop her. And I don't know. I don't know what he thinks about this. I didn't ask. I'm reading the Daily Star. It's like, you want to read some really funny crap, check that out. I think it's at dailystar.co.uk. It's another British tabloid, but man, they got the entertainment on full blast. They do. Crazy as crap. All right. So on Monday, we don't do Fridays here, of course. On Monday, we had a guest booked. And just before we went on the air here, just now, I found out that she has to reschedule. So we'll come up with something. We're doing a special show for April Fool's Day. I got to tell you that. That's going to be kind of interesting. And right now we're planning on having 4 different people on, not together either. We're going to have 4 different guests. They're all going to do a little thing, and some of it's comedy, some of it's just interesting, but that's the plan right now. We'll see if that works out. And we'll have somebody on Monday for sure, but it isn't going to be the person we're planning. So, our plan right now is we're planning on doing 4 shows next week. I don't know if that's going to work out. Yeah, that's the hardest part about doing this, folks, is booking the guests. I got to tell you, it is. We have to come up with and it can't just be anybody either. Somebody who has something to talk about. It's a talk show. So we'll be back on Monday. I don't know with who or what, but we will. I hope you have a nice weekend. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it a lot. If you get to Rumble or YouTube, please subscribe or like us or one of those things. I know everybody asks you to do it, but I need help. And you know that. Good night, Uncle Donnie, wherever you are. And good night to you, wherever you may be. We'll see you on Monday, folks. Have a nice weekend. Thanks.